Another January day 2 years ago, the Lieutenant Governor and myself had the inauguration. And I remember that inaugural speech. As you're looking at him, I went back and read all the previous ones that other governors had given. And you probably know there's a pretty simple formula to that. You identify what the challenges are, and then you try and put out some visions for the solution to those. Obviously, a lot's changed in 2 years. Over the last year, a once-in-a-century global pandemic, the death of George Floyd that sparked a global conversation around race and racism, and a very divisive national election that I guess you could say ended with an attempted insurrection on the Capitol. But on that day 2 years ago, one of the things I made very clear standing in front of Minnesotans as the only career public school teacher joined by a child advocate in the Lieutenant Governor, and made very clear that the challenges in the future were very closely entwined, and that education was the key to both of those. And talking that day that Minnesota has much to be proud of around education, some of the finest educators in the world, some of the best research at our universities, and to be very honest, some of the best outcomes. But what we knew was, as we started to dig deep into that over the last several years, that those outcomes weren't always equal. And depending on the color of your skin or your zip code, it could have a big impact on what those outcomes look like. And that wasn't only a moral imperative to fix, it was an economic imperative to fix for the state, ensuring that every child, regardless skin color or zip code, had the opportunity to get a world-class education. Now, COVID has certainly brought the conversation of the day to things like social distancing and mask wearing and vaccines and all the things that we've talked about now over 9 months. But during that time, it's also shined a very harsh spotlight on those very things we talked about on that day. Those inequities, whether they be inequities in health outcomes or whether they're inequities in educational opportunity and outcomes. And while it might be easy to say, well, we can't do much now, we're focused on COVID, we don't have the resources, and to turn back in, that would be exactly the wrong solution. So over these past 2 years, and especially even during COVID, we're looking at those things that we know can make a difference. And you're going to hear from a wide spectrum of stakeholders, some that might be counterintuitive of coming together. But what I heard from groups, whether they were convened around the idea of how do we get equitable school funding where we don't have to depend on property taxes and bond referendums, so some schools can have indoor swimming pools while others have leaky roofs and no opportunities for classes, to the idea of what are we doing really well, how can we ensure we do more of that, and where can we fill the gaps, and started to look at that.